Thank you for joining RSA Conference 2023 webinar. I'm going to hand over to our host, Jason Murrell, to kick us off. If you'd like to unmute, Jason, and take us away.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Yes, hello from sunny San Francisco. Actually, is quite nice here today. It's just tick past 7 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, and it's been a crazy busy few days. So, just for everyone's background, we've had a tradition here where we do an Australia House event, which happened on Monday, and then the last 2 days have been on the floor at RSA. So today, what we want to do is for people who couldn't make it, because I know there was a lot of people who couldn't sort of get across here, want to try and cover off as much as we can with regard to the conference itself, the Australian specific stuff that happened on the Monday. So that was looking at both Australian companies looking to expand or open up in the US, and also for businesses looking to come from the US actually over to Australia as well. So who are we? For those who don't know, AustCyber was founded in 2017. It's now part of the Stone & Chalk Group, so there was a merger about 2 years ago. But our main remit, which is still true today, was to look at the growth and assist with export and also education in the Australian market. So with the new strategy coming out from the Australian government, obviously we're taking a keen interest in and a part of that as well. So we've actually put an application, I'm sure, I'm hoping, and many people that are on this webinar today have done the same thing. So looking to form how we best, sort of grow the Australian ecosystem. So by 2030, we hit that target that Claire O'Neill has so sort of boldly sort of laid out, is to be the #1 cybersecurity nation in the world by 2030. So let's get into it. Let's cover up on some of the sort of key insights that we got from the event. So in conjunction with AustCyber, and we were actually sponsored by the New South Wales and Victorian governments, along with LastPass and Axonius as well for the event. We went into the offices of Global Vic and Austrade, and we actually ran 2 streams going in there. So one of the streams was basically, as I said, of the top Australian companies looking to enter the US market and how you sort of scale and grow in there. And the other stream was looking back the other way and how US companies can adjust. So off the top, I think one of the first things we sort of talked about, it was actually a really good conversation. Obviously, we have to sort of say before we get into the section when we're talking about, you can probably see on there, banking and investors, to obviously get legal and financial advice. So when I'm talking here, I'm going to talk in fairly generic and general terms. One of the first things that came through very clearly was that, when you get to the US, make sure that you try and get a beachhead into the US. So, when you're coming from Australia, we're 26 million people. So, that seems like a lot until you get to the US, where you're sort of more than 10 times or probably 11 times that amount. So one of the first things we're looking at in that first year as a business, and any business should do this anywhere, is where's your market? Where's your key market going to be? So, we sort of gave some examples there of, if you are, in Australia, basically dealing with a defence or government, then maybe you look to get to Maryland or into Washington, DC, or on that side of the country. So look at possibly an East Coast landing. A lot of people, I think, from Australia, and what they had seen, this was some of Austrade's feedback as well, is as Australian companies, especially if you're in cybersecurity, the trend was to tend to try and land in San Francisco. And there's a few things with regard to San Francisco. Obviously, it's not cheap to live here. The cost of living is quite expensive, from rental. The wages that people get paid are quite high here as well. So there's a few things to take into account. The other thing is too, that there are certain governments and locations in the US that will actually give you some decent help with regard to how you land. So they can give you some tax advantage. They might help you with paying for space, helping you find people. So there's a company that presented on Monday, Sidearm, and they've landed in Maryland, and there is some good deals to be had there too. So these are some of the things in that first year you want to sort of look at and be prepared for when going over there. With regard to banking, when setting up a bank account, it is better and this did cause a bit of debate in the room, it's better to have a separate bank account from your Australian account. So have a bank account set up here, which is specific to the US and separate from your Australian account. There was, and this goes into that legal and financial advice about where in particular you would like to have that business located for tax purposes, other reasons, but As I say, we've got a very short time here, so I won't go into that. But that could be an offline conversation, with some of the people, with ourselves or Austrade down the track. The other part that sort of came into play is the US investors. So often Australian companies are coming over here to look for finance as well. So they're looking to get some money in. And what happens or differentiates here between the VCs and Australia with regard to funding is it can be there's more here. So for example, and we'll cover that in a bit later in the presentation, with Australian companies that were pitching the other day, there were 6 Australian businesses and 10 VCs, or 6 or 8 businesses and 10 VCs there, that had done dealings with Australian companies, had invested previously. So they sort of knew the market. One of the things from a feedback point of view was that we often ask for too little. So Australians are not asking for enough money when they're coming over here, which was an interesting thing. So, but also, with the VCs, when dealing with them, what are they looking for? So this is, again, doing a little bit of research to find out what are they looking for, what VCs do you need to speak to, rather than sort of scattergunning the approach, being more targeted about the VC firms are looking for the type of specific product you're looking for or looking to sell. The other key thing they said too was that it's founder-led sales are a key too. So boots on the ground, the sooner you can get set up in the US, the better. And founder-led sales are the best way they sort of found to kick off. So in some ways for Australians, it feels like you're sort of taking a step or two backwards to take a step forward when coming here. But you want to make sure you do your groundwork at home and get the sales system down. One of the key differences that were happening here when they were saying building a team here in the US is that the salespeople can be a little bit more transient as well. So you want to have your system and your process down pretty tightly as a founder, and how you get those sales out the door. And people in the US, particularly when you're first starting, are wanting to be speaking with the founder to feel special and more secure in the fact of dealing with a new company and meeting the people behind the product. The other part to tick onto that when we were sort of talking about the founder-led sales was then coming into how to build a team over here in the US. And again, there's a few differences here between Australia and the US. Different regions, obviously, where you're going to be selling, different staff. So which recruiters you should be using, how you build a culture early on that matches up with something that you're going to get buy-in from US staff, including the customer service element of it as well. But one of the key things that was brought up there was to set the culture early. So, you're going to have to, they sort of said, hire 3 salespeople to really keep one. And they were talking about doing some Google relationship mapping, and that being a key when sort of first coming to the US as well. So there was a fair chunk of information in that first session, and I could see a lot of the startups were, taking down notes furiously. And there was a lot of sort of conversation just on that point. That was hour 1. When we got into the second session, we got into the next slide, please, Tom, of getting your business to scale. So here was an interesting part, because it's hard to get that momentum and get that start. But once you've got that start going and you need to start ramping up your business more, this can sometimes where, it gets a bit tenuous for some businesses. It's sometimes starting up the business is easier than scaling up, and more often than not, that's the case. So the thing they were talking about here in the US, and something I think we need to probably apply more in Australia, is the journey mapping for your clients. And just taking another step back, when you're building your stack here, obviously we are cybersecurity businesses. We should be building with cybersecurity in mind and having that happen as a matter of course. But a lot of Australian companies had been tripped up coming to the US by not having their security in-house and core and key themselves, not aligning with a lot of the metrics that the American companies look for with regard to compliance issues and things of that nature as well. So get that in place, obviously. That was a step I did miss in there. The journey mapping and sales funnel setup and how to scale and ramp up was something that was really interesting from the point of view of the SDRs, getting marketing, how to sell to the US companies and how to sell to larger organizations. One of the things I did say with the salespeople here is they do tend to switch jobs quite a bit, but they will tend to stay in a particular market. So if your product, just say, is governance, risk and compliance, if you have a client or your product is something which is more around penetration testing or asset management or whatever the case may be, you'll find that salespeople have stuck in a certain niche. So getting them on board, or someone who's sort of already been in the market and knows what other products are like in there, is probably going to be a key thing for you to sort of get happening as soon as you land in the US as well. The employment laws are something which was a bit tricky as well. So there was something where they sort of said, with getting salespeople and the employment laws, they can move a bit easier here. In Australia, there is a situation where it's a little bit harder to actually move on an employee if you're having some issues with regard to written warnings and the like. In the US, it's pretty easy to switch jobs. So that can be sort of a pro and a con, depending on where you look at it there. With regards to your sales funnel, they did say that it's going to be a bit different again in Australia. They do look more in America for word of mouth, also for customer recommendations. So having someone in the market in the US who can be someone who can be a spokesperson for you, they said was quite important as well, to have that happening right from the beginning. So if you can get a good cornerstone customer that will actually be a spokesperson for you, they did say that would be quite important as well. And obviously the other thing is there's actually a really big flywheel here in the US with regard to different ways you can sort of approach the market. The other thing that they did say was that having specific products and marketing to your business, they want a lot more proof of concept and a lot more information to back up what you're telling them. So quite often for Australian companies, it's too early to be, dealing with the Gartners of the world and products of that nature, which are sort of pay to play and can be quite costly. So they said that often in America, and this is not too different to Australia when we get to it, is that CISOs are a fairly tight-knit group, and those chat groups definitely have a big say in what products they buy. So usually it's getting someone on board who will buy your product and actually then be a spokesperson for you and actually really sort of pump up your product there and your services. So if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please, Tom. Okay, so this was quite interesting when they were sort of talking about getting even bigger in the next stage. Now, the first one here, and this was actually from an entrepreneur in residence here in San Francisco. He knows Australians quite well, and he actually was an ex-VC as well, but he said, specific questions to avoid bullshit. A lot of the times when Australian businesses have come here, Chris did say that a lot of the American companies will just spin you bullshit. You leave a meeting, and I've experienced this before when Jono and I first came over with CyberAware, that you think you're having really good meetings and they're saying yes, 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 and it sounds really good. And you go back home thinking, this is fantastic, these people are really keen. But what Chris was saying is they'll often just give you BS and it's not anything, they're not trying to be rude, they're actually trying the reverse, is to make you feel good, but they're not actually, they're not actually going to do anything with you. So knowing the specific questions to ask to cut through that, both on the sales side and the VC side, they said was actually really key. Separating your product from the pack as well. Do as much research as you can before getting here. Again, coming from a smaller market in Australia, we tend to know the market fairly well there, and we have a fair idea on the larger size companies from the US. But one of the things is that, with such a big market and being so spread out, that we sometimes miss, is there a product already in market? So make sure you do your research on that. And if there are, how are you different, or how are we better? That's a really key thing. So knowing your key competitors in the market, whether they be the really big end of town, or if they're in a mid-market or lower market that's similar to you, why is your product or service going to be better, and how is it different? The hustle part was another thing that they really did sort of drill home. Australia, we can tend to come across a little bit more laid back. And there is a fine balance here. The Americans did, again, admit that they are a bit more aggressive with their sales and use more sales tactics, which even they did say was sort of starting to back off a bit. The market has changed with regard to that. But Australians are probably too far the other way. We're not actually hustling from enough to get leads, speed of getting our product in market, pivoting and changing if there's changes within reason that need to happen in the market. So, and then just hustling and actually the work ethic here. It's not unusual with the startups here. They were saying to be doing your 6 or 7 days a week. And they said, seriously, 6 days a week. And that is of just hustling and sales and and speaking to people and doing your research on your products and all that sort of stuff as well. So that was a real key thing. Also here, and I don't think this really differs in Australia, but again, I don't feel it's something that a lot of us probably do well, and that is actually doing real company and research on the key people within the business there. So with that, what we're talking about is, what does the company put out that they're saying they actually really want to focus on? So it is taking the time to read through sometimes financial reports or financial statements, press releases, posts that they might be putting on LinkedIn, to get a flavor and a sound of what they're sort of looking for, so that when you're having a meeting with them, you cut through the BS by basically saying, hey, I noticed that on your recent post, on your recent announcement, you stated that XYZ. Well, here's how we help with XYZ. What our product does and helps with is doing this, this, and this. So, you know, matching it up and actually finding it. So really doing specific research on the company and the key people that you'll be selling to. So knowing what that person's bought, knowing what products they like. And it's just going to take some time to go through their social media, just say on LinkedIn, go through any reports or anything that they've said in any internal communications or external stuff that you can see, to find out how your product and service can actually help them, and then actually match that up to their needs. And the customer interviews was another thing that they said, you know, when getting into this larger stage, once you've got your CRM set up and you've started that, you've qualified, you've demoed, and you've got all your customers actually going through, the customer interview, they said, is a key thing to know where your deals are getting stuck or lost. So in a pipeline, whatever, you know, CRM you're using, where are you finding that the deals are slowing down or stopping, and how can you fix that? Again, we have services and things that can help with that sort of thing. And this is not about, you know, pitching the wherewithal of, you know, AustCyber, Stone and Chalk and AustTrade, but something that you need to keep in mind is that if there is a sticking point within that, how do you fix that, or how do you unblock and unclog that? And one of the best ways they found was actually doing customer interviews to find, why did you buy? What do you like about us? What could we do better? You know, and all those sorts of things, and actually getting to know your customer really well, then that obviously will reflect back into your sales process. So the customer interviews should be an ongoing thing. It's just a way to make sure that the customer is using the product properly, that they are happy, and just finding out why they did buy. What was it? Did they like the salesperson? Did they like the presentation? Was it a cost thing? Whatever the case may be, so that you can adjust accordingly, you know, as you sort of go through the stages there. So the other part of the day we had was the Australian CISO roundtable. So this was key chief information security officers from Australia that, you know, normally you wouldn't get access to. And I find going to these conferences, if you can make it, actually really beneficial for a few reasons. Obviously, you're taking people out of their sort of zone, or out of their comfort zone, or where they're normally based, and you can they'll actually be very open. So this is where it did sort of be a bit more closed down. We had in the picture there, you'll see Andre, the CISO from Transurban in the background. Sitting just off the right shoulder there is Peter from Woolworths. We had Ben from Thales. We had VJ from Unicyber. We had Nigel Hedges from Kmart / Target. So, you know, these people, we had some people there from AGL. These are, you know, in Australia, in the upper levels and upper echelons of CISOs, and to actually hear them and actually understand their role, I think is a very important thing for us. Again, selling here in Australia, but it's very reflective of what happens in the US. Understanding their role and what they're tasked with is an interesting thing. One of the key things, and this will touch on how they choose their products, is that quite often they said they get salespeople or people trying to go direct to them to offer their product, when 9 times out of 10, it's actually their team which finds a problem or something that needs a solution. They go out and do the research, basically sell to the CISO why that is a product they want to use, and then the CISO will sign off on it based upon what his team's recommendations are there. So that's quite interesting. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, building rapport with the key people that match up with your product in team and how you can help them is oftentimes better than actually looking and going and hassling the CISO. Who, and I know Helen, who is a CISO over in America, originally from Australia, did say that she seriously gets 400 emails a day from people hitting her up. She's actually looks after product, CISO product, not actually the CISO, but they see her title on LinkedIn, and she said she just gets smashed with emails and everything like that. And they all said the worst thing you can do is by the third email to sort of say, oh, well, you're obviously not interested in cybersecurity, and sort of cancel out. Don't do that sort of thing. Their pay points, in Australia, when speaking, the CISOs obviously said that one of the issues they had, with the Optus, Medibank and Latitude sort of issues and situations that had happened, that the pain points had been that had actually had extra pressure put on them by often their boards and other people in the organisation. So the pain points was often they weren't getting enough budget, and now they're probably not getting any more budget, but they're actually getting a lot more pressure on them to actually deliver. So understand that they're busy and under the pump and very stressed all the time, and especially under conditions the way they are in Australia. How they choose their products, as I said, we've pretty much covered that there too. Get to understand what the stack is and what else they use there too, so you can see how your product might be able to use an API or something to talk to that, or make sure that it sits in their system well too, so that you can say that this product will seamlessly join into there. And then with the what's next section was quite interesting too. The AI thing came up, and there was actually a bit of a debate on a few sides there about how that will be implemented. Although it's been investigated at the moment, it hasn't really gone and made a massive difference to any of the organisations that were in the room there. But we're expecting, with some of the threat hunting and some of the other parts of the equation, that they could see that could have some benefit. But obviously, we're quite wary on the other side of the fence with what AI could do on the other side. And when we sort of talk about the RSA conference a bit more generally, I can sort of touch on where that's sort of been coming up on a lot of the stands and a lot of the talks that I've actually attended while being over here over the last couple of days. So Tom, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. So the other highlights we had on the day, and this is obviously close to my heart, being a lover of starting up and supporting people who are mad enough to jump off the cliff and build the plane on the way down. I found this, I'd never seen this done before, and it was actually an idea that came out of the Austrade team, which I think they'd seen at a Telstra Ventures event here in the US before. It was 3-minute pitches to VCs. So we had the Australian businesses there, our startups, no slides, pretty much standing out there naked on the floor, as you can see with Ian and Ikran's pic in the background there, and basically had 3 minutes to pitch their product. Really good way to do it, because it just gives you give us the nuts and bolts and the key information and why people really should be listening to your pitch. Off the back of that, what happened was a speed matchmaking. So each one of the founders or the people involved in each of the startups got to sit down with the VCs, who I was sort of standing on. They were feverishly writing down notes on a lot of the startups, and then did the speed matchmaking just to have one-on-one conversations and get down to a bit more brass tacks. The other thing that was done too was they had $2 and $1 for everyone who was in the audience to put into the different businesses to see who was most popular on the day. Also on the day, it was a full-on day. We had 2 streams running, luckily, so I need to clone myself or split myself in half next time. But the Australian Cybersecurity Roundtable had key members of government there from Home Affairs and ACSC and the like to discuss about the new cyber security strategy and how we can play a part in that and how that's going to look. At AustCyber, obviously, we're looking to bring the whole ecosystem together and work more collaboratively, and that's what obviously the government would like and like to see and needs to see, basically, with this new strategy coming together. And it was good to hear reflected in a lot of the conversation and the feedback that's been coming back from the roundtables, not just this one today, but all the ones previous, that I really feel we're actually starting to pull together, and it actually flowed through and seemed to really be coming through from some of the feedback from government as well. It was brought up about how we can actually help our startups or how that should look going forward, or how it could look. And then the fun part of the night, the Australian House reception. So we had over 100 people on the floor there, drinking and networking from both sides, from the US and the Australian teams. And it was a great night and a great crew. Just the day couldn't have gone better. So I'm really hoping to see a lot of positive outcomes coming from this for all of our startups, and actually I think a lot of the US companies were very impressed with Australia. When you look at the stats, especially with the 2 sponsors we have with Victoria and New South Wales government, how highly we rank. New South Wales sits number 1 on a lot of metrics, and Victoria is not too far behind. They're both very well matched as places to actually land in Australia, and did a good representation of that along with Austrade as well. But the reception was a fantastic night. There's plenty of food and Austrade supplied the alcohol, so that was flowing freely, and everyone had a fun night. And yeah, it was really good. So that's Monday. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly jump on to just to give you the RSA sort of piece of it. So with regard to RSA, look, it just gets bigger and bigger. Tom, if you don't mind, next slide, please, mate. It's the floors get more nuts, but I'm sort of wondering, is bigger often better? I'm thinking back to the first time I went, which was in 2018, and I found it a lot more approachable. It just seems to be, it's almost like a disco or a party. It's just noise bombardment and people floating everywhere and everyone offering the same sort of things. There hasn't been really a change in how people do the stands. I sort of put the picture in there. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but of Wiz, like they're a bit of, they're one of the cool kids on the block at the moment. And obviously Wiz, Wizard of Oz, nice little theme. You'll see the Tin Man and Scarecrow there. Dorothy and the rest of the crew are hanging up the other side. They even had Yes Dogs there for Toto and everything like that. Some of the stands were, 2 levels. They had offices where they were having meetings with people, and it is crazy busy, but really to find the differentiation in the market is actually really difficult at the moment. It's looking so same. So I've got some ideas. I haven't come up with any solutions, but how we could sort of present better, I think, as an industry in whole, as a whole, and in particular, I've got some ideas, obviously, around how we can sort of hopefully help our Australian businesses stand out and be a bit different. These conferences, beneficial or not, hard to say. I put the out and about there line because most of the deals and most of the conversations tend to, at these events, or especially at RSA Fight, happen around the outside. Where I'm sitting here at the moment is actually with, I met with Julia Wilcox, who's a cyber ambassador from the UK. So we're looking to do some things with the UK, and I'm at their event tonight, which is similar to what we did on Monday. And most of the things that happen and most of the best conversations that we tend to be having are having out of the actual conference and around it. So most of the brands are actually setting up these sorts of events. And thank you them for letting me use a nice quiet room out the back here to do this call. But it's really, most of the work gets done on the outside. How you find the sort of products you're looking for, how they can make their directory better would help. Keeping maybe groupings a bit better together. They seem to spread. If you're trying to compare products, I know why they do it. They're not trying to keep the same products near each other. They don't want that competition. But often if you're doing it, it's like, if you've ever seen, Jeff Shed down in Victoria, it's like 5 or 6 times as big as, one of the biggest conferences I've seen there. It's bananas how big they are. And so they probably need to look at a different way of doing it. No one can see a demo of these sorts of things. They're always trying to entice people with $100 notes or win an iPad or something to sit down and look at a presentation, in this busy environment. I think if you offered soundproof headphones and massage to watch a presentation, you probably get a lot better of a look in, I think. But what's changed? I don't think a great deal. Look, I know that Michael, our CEO, and some of the team went last year. From people I've spoken to last year, there's more people here this year. Some of the stands that were bigger last year have reduced in size from what I've heard from speaking to people, and some have gone the other way. So I remember in 2018 when I went, Red Canary gave us a box to take back to Australia and said, try this out. Now they've got this monstrosity of a stand there, so they're obviously, hitting home runs in the market. But looking ahead, talking to most of the people and looking at the presentations, the AI thing, as I say, it's tending to be exciting and also looked upon as a threat. So a lot of people are talking about how do we look at advancing this and using this? And there's other people, as I say, talking about how AI technology is being used on the attacking side, for doing better phishing emails and writing things on that side. So look, it's interesting. Looking ahead, cybersecurity is only going to get bigger by the look of it. The spending is going higher. There's more companies throwing more money at it. I was talking to some people from AT&T last night. Their focus and fixation on cyber is only getting bigger. So I think one of the things I've been sort of preaching and sort of talking about to anyone will listen is how do we get cybersecurity in the hands of the kids younger? So, in talking to AT&T, and what we're trying to do in Australia is get it started earlier on in the cycle. So I know Hackers Jack have been speaking to a lot of larger school districts here in New York and in Texas, etc., and the Australian government hopefully looking to do the same sorts of thing. Let's get it started earlier. I know we keep looking down at fixing problems and situations down here, but if we can get kids getting good cyber hygiene early, like the old seatbelt on in the car or brushing your teeth, it's as important. So, it's something I think that a lot of companies are starting to consider and think, like the Dolomite accounts when we were kids. Well, I'm a bit older than maybe some of you on the call, but Commonwealth Bank used to give you like a piggy bank or open up an account, a Dolomite account, so you'd start using Commonwealth Bank and get your customer in train early and get them saving and get them used to using your bank. I think cyber companies, some of them in particular, are starting to look there as a way to actually start getting people into that sales cycle nice and early. So there's some of the things we've seen. I've still got one more day, so it's only Monday was our day, Australia Day. I've done 2 days on the floor, which was pretty much the north and south side over the last 2 days, and then gone into some of these sessions, which have been awe-inspiring in a lot of ways. But every time I come over here, I do get excited about what Australia can actually do. I think we've got some real potential. We just got to believe in ourselves a bit more and get a bit more assistance where we can. But I think, when you see the Americans and how gung-ho they are, and they're not shy and they're keen to ask for as much money as they want to get their deals going. I think, if we can sort of start to impart some of that and get that into our ecosystem and into our belief structure. And from the lessons we've learned, we're still a very young industry, cybersecurity, and especially in Australia. Really, when 2017, when this happened, when Malcolm Turnbull started the growth centres and started AustCyber, really in its infancy, the sort of growth and even the learnings we talked about Cyrise before, what they would have learned about, companies and VCs, and you keep building up this, Teledex, as the Americans say, as you keep going further along and learn the lessons, what to do, what not to do. I think Team Australia, as we were calling it over here, is working a lot better together to actually help people come into market. So I think when you come into market now, you're coming in with a lot more knowledge. So there's going to be less mistakes and you're going to be able to actually hit the ground running a lot better with a lot better support here, I think, from all of us, from AustCyber, Austrade, the state governments and the like as well. So yeah, I think this whole trip has been fantastic. I'm glad we did it and we got here with the thanks to our sponsors and support of our community. But I'm looking forward to actually really hitting this big next year and making it an even greater event for Australia, just being selfish there. So I think that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to cover there. I'll sort of wanted to open up to Q&A if anyone's got any questions they may have about anything that we covered here. It was a lot of stuff, but if there's any specific stuff that you might like some questions to, that would be great. Just looking at the poll here, actually, it's just popped up on the screen. So which scaling stage is most challenging for you? We had entering the US market at 25%, building a team at 25%, and actually navigating CISO relationships at around 50%. So that's an interesting one to know. It is key, the CISO relationships are with their team, so I'm glad we covered that. Which investor engagement aspect is most valuable? It was learning from successful startups by a mile. So that was a no-brainer on that one. And what is the most important factor for cybersecurity business success? Neck and neck, really, with regard to in-depth research and interviews and staying ahead of the industry. So thank you to everyone who participated in that part there. Some Q&A. So I'm just going to look in here. So we've got, other than, as mentioned, San Francisco, any discussion for other business location areas such as Seattle, Washington, DC, New York? Yeah, so I did sort of touch on that quickly, but Maryland seems to have been an area where a lot of Australian startups are sort of hitting at the moment. Consider Texas as well. Texas is really going leaps and bounds and doing some great things in the state of Texas. So that's somewhere also to consider. With those sorts of things, I think it's really something you want to say, where's your product and market fit and where are you going to be best landing? So where's your product? So as I said, it was a really simplistic example, but it makes sense if you're going to be dealing with government, be in and around Washington, DC, for the banking sector, maybe more New York, depending also, what your product or service is, where you're going to land. I think that's probably the key. So again, we can help you with that one. What are the key success factors for Australian cyber startups entering the US market? So Mohan was on one of the panels who's been here 7 years now. Mark Arena was another one who's successfully grown a business here and he's now moved back to Perth. Time in market, one of the best things they said is you've got to be here and you've got to pretty much be here full time. So you've got to make that commitment. Some of them said that they tried the flying in and flying out, where they'd be here for 3 or 4 weeks and then fly back to Australia, or do 3-month stint and then go back. The longer or more permanently you can stay here, the better. They said you need to commit at least 12 to 18 months at being on the ground, building up the relationships, being seen here and supporting from the US. They said you can use Australia as a backup, to say from a support point of view, if you're looking to do long-term support, but you have to be here. To be successful, it's really hard to do it from staying in Australia. That was one of the key things there. Other than technologies, any commentary, advice on training, education, awareness opportunity for so there is, look, the main players are still the same. Like, I remember when we first came over in 2018 with cyberware and thought, oh, look at KnowBe4, how big they are, and Cofense and the like. They're still the same people in the market. So it hasn't really changed. There's not that much new in that part. I think the way people are delivering the education awareness pieces are different. I think people are looking for more of an experience in training rather than just your standard, just watch something and then answer a few questions and move on, or just tick a box and tick and flick. So they're looking for a bit more with their training now, but look, still not enough people are doing it. So I think the commentary and advice on training is that we need more companies doing it, and still it's known in the market there aren't enough people doing it. The most effective strategies for raising capital from investors, particularly in the US market. Get to know your VCs that are basically raise capital for businesses similar or same, seems to be a key thing. There are ones here that are very niche and very specific. In Australia, we probably, with the VCs we have, especially in cyber area, a bit more broad ranging just because the market isn't that big. But in the US, you will find that they can be quite niche and quite specific to a certain product range or product type or SaaS platform. So probably look for that. Also word of mouth. And again, this is where, AustTrade can really help you with that sort of thing and get you investor ready and actually start to make introductions for you. So using those sorts of, pre-existing or people that have had success investing in some Australian business or other businesses similar to yours is probably a key thing there. And other opportunities for training, exec briefs on CISO data, privacy, responsibilities. Yeah, I suppose there would be. I mean, push anything forward and happy to explore. So that's what we're here for with AustCyber, AustTrade, and as I say, with the state governments, anything that we can sort of try and set up around those sorts of things with the right sort of people, we're happy to look at there. So just another question on feedback from investors in the US where Australians don't ask as much for investments. Okay, is there an opportunity to qualify more? I think, you need to, obviously you've built up some sales in like, to say Australia and or here. So they want to see some history of sales and that you've actually, closed some sales, money in bank, and then also some projected sales in there as well. So the VCs almost sort of in some ways will say, here's a list of 200 names, go and sell them and let's see what the outcome is to see if you're worthy, over here. So they sort of will sort of back you once you get here in some ways and sort of give you some leads or warm leads, or you go find some to prove if you're actually worthy of the VC money. I think Australians, why we ask for so little is because I don't think we're used to the size of the market here. 1% of the market in Australia can make you a bit of money, but 1% of the market in America can make you a millionaire or a multimillionaire. So it's a difference in size there. And I think we go in with the mindset of, well, if I was growing this business or raising money in Australia, I'm sort of raising at that amount. So we probably just don't hit big enough. So we tend to give too much away for too little. And this was coming from a VC here in the US. Any businesses focusing on the home cybersecurity market? There are, look, the US are sort of looking at it, if I'm understanding the question right, and I might be incorrect here, but the businesses focusing on home security, I say cybersecurity for the home market, not so much. So one thing that was said by Ben, one of the CISOs from Thales, was that the market in Australia tended to be, and talking from a perspective of businesses, very big at the top, like the top is very big, and then we have a really big drop off. So he was saying around 98% of all businesses are 200 employees or less. Now, I'm not sure that stat, so that's something that I'll just take his word for. But then at the upper end, we've got the 40,000, 30,000 staff sort of ones, like the big banks and people of that nature. The home market and focusing at home in Australia is probably not so much. in America, I haven't heard too much about home, and this is a conversation having with AT&T. That's where they're looking to bring it into the home. So already doing phone, telecommunications, moving into cyber. That's something they're looking at home and protecting the home market. But maybe it's still a little bit too small. I know from ourselves trying previously and from other companies in Australia trying to sell to SMEs, like small to medium-sized enterprise in Australia, can be quite challenging just because of budget constraints on there. And observations on what was present for legal risk. Okay, incident risk, there is a lot. So with regard to incident management and everything, there's a lot of GRC stuff, the same sort of big players you'd expect. We've got a few, so 6 Clicks came and presented, from our side, from a GRC sort of point of view. InfoSec, like with Fiona Long, is there as well. So there's Australian companies trying to look to fill that void, but yeah, there's some behemoths in the market around all those sorts of areas, and there's some new players sort of started to come in from the US and other parts of the world as well. So Germany had a specific standard, had one, Spain did as well. From other parts of the world. UK here, once this finishes, I'll go and have a chat to some of the businesses there and look where their focus is. But yeah, I think around the world, we're all sort of looking at the same thing. So there's, with this connected world there doesn't seem to be too much difference between what we're all sort of focusing on, what sort of products. So finding that product market fit is key, and finding out what a customer actually needs first is obviously very important as well. So I think that's all from a questions point of view, but I thank everyone for your time. I hopefully gave you some information that was useful. We did cover a bit tonight, and as always, happy to continue the conversation and help in any way we can along the way. So reach out to ourselves, as I said, to Austrade, Investment New South Wales, Global Vic, depending where you're located, and other state governments are doing some fantastic work in both SA, Queensland, Tasmania, WA, Northern Territory, ACT. I don't think I've missed anyone there. Get in contact locally, get in contact with us. We're all working together to try and make all of our startups and all our people as successful as possible. So yeah, please reach out if you have any more questions or need anything. The conversation doesn't end here. Hopefully for a lot of you, it's just beginning, and we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you over here next year with the 2024 conference. So thank you, everyone. And Tom, if you just want to wrap it up and cover anything I might have missed. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. If you reach out to the website, you can find a contact email there, and you can reach out to Jason and the team, find out more and get involved in the great programs AustCyber is doing, and also learn more about the Stone and Chalk Group. Thank you for joining us. This will be available on demand shortly, so please check out the AustCyber socials for more, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone.